Thank you very much. Please be seated. Your Excellency, President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya, and our special guest today, Your Excellencies, members of the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament, speakers of our national parliaments, honorable members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ambassadors, high commissioners, and representatives of the various diplomatic missions, our distinguished invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, Secretariat of the Pan-African Parliament.
French.
Translation? Translation now? Good. On behalf of members of the Bureau and members of the Parliament, let me once again welcome His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, who has graciously come to honor us with his esteemed presence to grace the opening ceremony of the 6th Ordinary Session of the 3rd Parliament and to deliver a goodwill address. Your Excellency, I am particularly honored and gladdened by your kind and wonderful gesture of taking time off your very busy schedule to be with us today. Not only to encourage the work that we do as parliamentarians, but also for me personally to make my very last session as President of the PAP a very memorable one. I thank you, Excellency. Your Excellency, honorable colleagues, distinguished invited guests, the people of Africa can no longer wait to see a united and integrated Africa, devoid of insurgency, terrorism, conflicts, and political instability, as we see in many parts of Africa today. Within an African continent where movement of persons, goods, and services is unimpeded by the various high tariffs, absence of cross-border financial instruments, complex customs arrangements, and limited regional harmonization of policies and regulations. A continent where all our citizens have equal opportunity to obtain access to good and quality education, healthcare, nutrition, housing, and employment opportunities in a peaceful and stable environment. An Africa where our various governments have respect for fundamental human rights of its citizens. Your Excellency, the Pan-African Parliament stands shoulder to shoulder with you in your fight against terrorism. And we once again condole with you and the people of Kenya on the recent terrorist attack in the university in Garissa, resulting in the loss of innocent lives and many others. We also roundly condemn other acts of terrorism across the continent by Boko Haram in Nigeria and elsewhere in Africa. Your Excellency, your visit is at a very opportune moment. Permit me to recall that the draft protocol, the Pan-African Parliament, underwent various validation processes before it was finally adopted by the Assembly of Heads of States and Government at the African Union Summit held in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea in June 2014. We are grateful to Your Excellency in particular and all other heads of government for the support that they have given to the Pan-African Parliament. By this gesture, Our leaders have started a process of establishing a Pan-African Parliament that will be a strong democratic institution that will help to deepen democracy, good governance, transparency, and accountability on the continent. The subsequent ratification means that the PAP will be able to develop transnational policy frameworks based on AU shared values that will help build the integration of our continent to transcend national borders. Excellency, may I crave your indulgence to join hands with my fellow parliamentarians as we advocate for the ratification, which has today only one signatory. Your Excellency, this Parliament is looking up to you, using your good offices as an influential member of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government, starting with your own country, to give us the support that we need to acquire the number of ratifications that's needed to endow the Pan-African Parliament with the legislative functions it so richly desires and deserves. Your Excellency, on this note, may I, without much ado, invite you to please rise while I read a brief citation. Excellencies, honorable colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I consider it a great honor and a thing of pride for me to present a brief biography of President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya, a Pan-Africanist par excellence, an illustrious son of Africa, a dynamic leader with great intellect, tainted with humility. This rare gem was born Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, son of the founding father of Kenya, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, former president of the Republic of Kenya. You would therefore agree with me that he was born with leadership blood running in his veins. He's a chip of the old block, and therefore not a surprise that he has been able to carve a political niche for himself and is presently writing his own history. His name, Uhuru, which his parents chose to give him at birth, is a Swahili word which means freedom. President Jomo Kenyatta was a freedom fighter who led the fight for the realization of independence in Kenya from British rule. He must have given his son that name to signify great expectations. It is therefore satisfying to observe that these expectations have been expressed in his political career. President Uhuru Kenyatta attended the Roman Catholic school, St. Mary's in Nairobi. As a student in this school, he played rugby as a winger. Sadly, his father died when he was only 17 years old, while still studying at St. Mary's on 22nd of August 1978. However, he remained undeterred and focused in his pursuit of his destiny. After completing his studies at St. Mary's, he attended Amherst College in Massachusetts, United States, graduating with a bachelor's degree in political science and economics in the year 1985. President Uhuru Kenyatta is not one of those politicians without public service and entrepreneurial experience necessary in administration. Thus, before venturing into politics, he worked as a bank teller at the Kenya Commercial Bank, Nairobi, from 1978 to 1980. Thereafter, in the year 1981, he founded his own company, Welham Kenya Limited, which dealt with exportation of horticultural products. In 1994, he sold his company as he wanted to concentrate on politics. His political career started in the early 1990s. During this time, the then second president of Kenya, President Daniel Arap Moi, did not allow much freedom of political pluralism. His political party, KANU, was the only political party functioning in Kenya. Therefore, in the mid-1990s, among other political leaders fighting for political pluralism, President Uhuru Kenyatta, together with 4 other young Kenyans, joined the fight, requesting for the freedom of forming political parties. President Kenyatta, together with his friends, were in their late 20s then. Finally, when President Moi allowed multi-party elections in 1992, President Uhuru Kenyatta campaigned for Kenneth Matiba for the position of presidency. Before the general election was to be held in December 1997, President Uhuru Kenyatta had built a strong enough foundation of supporters, sure that he was going to win as a member of parliament for the Gatundu South constituency, where he lost the seat to Moses Muhai. However, in 1999, he was appointed by the then president as the new chairman of the Kenya Tourism Board. In 2001, he was nominated to parliament by President Moi and appointed Minister for Local Government. In 2002, President Kenyatta contested both the presidency and his Gatundu South parliamentary seat. He lost the presidential bid to an opposition coalition led by Mwai Kibaki. However, he won the MP seat to become an official opposition in the parliament. In 2007, President Kenyatta backed the re-election of the incumbent President Kibaki. He himself was not a candidate. In the resulting coalition government, President Kenyatta was appointed Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, a position he held until 2013 when he was of Kenya. Following the hotly contested and disputed 2007-2008 presidential elections, President Uhuru Kenyatta was indicted by the International Criminal Court, ICC, on charges of crimes against humanity in connection with the resultant post-election violence. However, the ICC failed to proceed to full hearing for lack of evidence, even though he had humbly submitted himself to jurisdiction. President Uhuru Kenyatta is married to Margaret Kenyatta and they are blessed with 3 grown-up children. From the foregoing political travels, you will agree with me that President Uhuru Kenyatta did not become who he is today by accident or faith. He rather worked hard and passed through the crucibles, worked hard to become an internationally recognized political celebrity whose name is now a recurring decimal in the lexicon of international criminal justice research. A man whose ordeal and experience has provoked Africa to begin to find homegrown solutions to our criminal justice challenges. I'm indeed honored to introduce to you a political icon, an honorable and brave Pan-Africanist, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellency, it is my special honor and privilege to, on behalf of the members of the Pan-African Parliament, invite you, Your Excellency, to address this august house. Your Excellency, you have the podium.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Bethel Nameeka Amadi, President of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Vice Presidents of this august Parliament, Honorable Members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, the clerk and staff of the Pan-African Parliament, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying that it is a great honor to stand before you, you, the representatives and the voice of the people of our great continent of Africa. Let me, at the very onset, state that we do not only support the great work that you do, but recently our National Assembly did pass the protocol and ratified the protocol of the Pan-African Parliament, and I myself will have the proud honor very shortly of signing the protocol, and as thus making Kenya the second country after Mali to ratify this protocol. Let me also take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. President, for your warm welcome and the hospitality shown to me and my delegation since we arrived. Indeed, it is wonderful to be back in this beautiful country and to remember that South Africa's story is also Africa's story, a struggle against oppression, crowned ultimately by a glorious victory. Honorable members, I stand here today not just as head of state of Kenya, but also as an African who shares your dream of a united and prosperous continent, free of the shackles of poverty and conflict. Like you, I am certain that for all the challenges we face, Africa will confound the pessimists, and we will achieve the prosperity, the freedom, and the dignity that our birthright entitles us to. The omens are good, and these are the most promising times for our continent since our elders won independence for us some 50 years ago. Let me at the very onset, however, stress that the path to Africa's renaissance does not pass through our past. Our renaissance rests on our accepting that our history, no matter how ugly it may be at times, is sealed. To borrow from Albert Luthuli, and I quote, "Let me invite Africa to cast her eyes beyond the past. Ours is to honor the past and to look to the future," end of quote. So let me take a moment to remember those who came before us, those who laid the foundations on which we build today. Across the years, we still hear the voices of the great Pan-Africanists, Dubois, Luthuli, Nkrumah, Nyerere, Kenyatta, Kaunda, and of course, a son of this soil, Nelson Mandela. They and many others faced high obstacles, much higher than ours, and yet they gave themselves to the cause of the total liberation of this continent from Cape to Cairo. They learned and taught a very hard lesson, that we Africans can either put aside our differences and find common ground on which to build our future together, or we can remain divided, in which case we will be dominated by the very same pitiless forces that once enslaved us. When we remember the conflicts that still rage in pockets of the continent, I wonder sometimes whether we have learned that lesson as well as they did. But it is also true, honorable members, that the very establishment of this body is a sign that we have taken their precept of unity to heart. As you know, this Parliament was set up to ensure that the peoples of Africa were fully involved in the economic development and integration of the continent. The protocol that created this body laid out some very specific objectives, chief among them the need to strengthen continental solidarity and build a sense of common destiny amongst the peoples of Africa. I mention that principle because, quite simply, all our hopes for the future depend on its achievement. Allow me to briefly highlight some of the key milestones of that journey. The process formally began in July. In truth, we have talked for far too long about the need for solidarity, both to seize the opportunities before us and to confront the internal and external forces that hold back our progress. It might be better if, instead of preaching the gospel of solidarity one more time, a brother shares his experience with you for the journey of solidarity and integration in East Africa and what lessons this has taught us. Allow me to briefly highlight some of the key milestones of that journey in East Africa. The process formally began in July of 2000, together with the other 4 current members, namely Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi. We undertook to establish 4 things: a customs union, a common market, a monetary union, and ultimately a political federation. The customs union is already in place, and the implementation of the common market is ongoing. In November of 2013, we signed the protocol establishing the East African Monetary Union. This was an enormous step for the East African community and a clear demonstration of our commitment to this integration process. Despite our comparatively small individual economies, the integration of the 5 East African economies has placed the entire region on a trajectory of growth that will fundamentally transform East Africa. Our own recent discoveries of commercially viable oil and gas deposits in the region have only strengthened that expectation. To bolster growth, we have undertaken joint infrastructure projects to support trade, investment, and the free movement of our people across the region, as well as goods and services. Our One Area Network project means that there are no longer roaming fees on mobile telephony in the region. Our common tourist visa means easier access to the entire region by visitors, and the use of national identity cards and student identity cards ensures that our people's movement is not hindered, and harmonizing of university fees and ultimately curriculums will ensure a standardized level of tertiary education. This, I believe, is an unstoppable path to transformation and integration of our region. As you well know, regional integration is fraught with challenges, misunderstandings, as well as pitfalls. We know what it is to be faced with divisions of creed and culture. We know what it is like to be faced with the fires and fears that fire xenophobia. We know what it is like to face the legacies of violence and hatred. But we have learned that history holds us together, and that the benefits of working together are far more important than our divisions. It is not immodest to say that we have exceeded the expectations, not just of our critics, but also of our supporters. We in East Africa owe that success to our common resolve and our blunt refusal to be divided. Honourable members, the same trends that we see in East Africa play out on a far larger scale across the world. We live in an increasingly interconnected planet. All around us, we see and feel the powerful effects of globalization. These new dynamics present us with a set of new challenges that demand from us fresh thinking, if only because many of the institutions, programs, and strategies on which we rely today were created for a new battle for cultural, economic, and political supremacy. Technology has torn away the screens that once obscured our view of the world and indeed of ourselves. Africans are talking with people across the globe and to each other, sharing ideas, images, and innovation. It is a time of discovery and excitement, yet amid the glitter, we cannot afford to be blind of the enormous risks presented by this free flow of information. What does it mean to be an African today? Have we accepted and internalized the narrative that Africa is a hopeless continent of disaster and death? Or do we still have the conviction and courage to write a new script of hope that we can pass on to our children? The question that I am asking is, will globalization work for Africa in the long run, or will it work against us? Will it mean justice for all, or will it simply reinforce the disadvantaged position to which our continent has been confined for decades? If indeed Africa is to benefit from the global advancements in science and technology, then those of us who have the privilege and responsibility of leadership must lead with a clear sense of purpose. Our governments and institutions at the national, regional, and continental levels need to operate strategically and with dogged determination to serve the interests of the people of Africa. More pointedly, the future of our continent cannot be left to the good graces of outside interests. Dependence on giving at the good graces only of outside interests. Dependency on giving that appears to be charitable must end. Foreign aid, which so often comes with terms and conditions that preclude progress, is not an acceptable basis for prosperity and freedom, and it is time to give it up. Honourable members, we cannot begin to escape the grip of dependency and to make the best of globalization by turning it to our own ends. We can begin to escape the grip of dependency and to make the best of globalization by turning it to our own ends. So let me say on behalf of the people of Kenya that our doors are open to you. We welcome any African who comes to visit us, to work, or to learn, so long as they are happy to obey our laws. Whether you are from Mali or Egypt or South Africa, we welcome you to Kenya. As we have stated, and I have stated severally in the past, Kenya is happy on a reciprocal basis to issue our African visitors with visas on arrival at our ports of entry. I believe that we must also welcome our sons and daughters who live outside the continent. Time and again, we who were left at home have failed to open the door to them. Never again. And for my part, I will this July welcome a great many, including President Barack Obama of the United States, whose father was a Kenyan. In July, when we co-host the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, and I take this opportunity to welcome all of you to come and join us, and let this occasion light the fire of solidarity between our diaspora and ourselves. Mr. President, the building of bridges between our countries and peoples is a delicate task. It demands equal parts subtlety and firmness, imagination and empathy. It is these virtues on which we must rely in order to resist at all costs the worrying trends of religious, ethnic, and xenophobic conflicts that we see flaring up in different pockets of our great continent. And it's important I repeat that again. Mr. President, on this note, I would like to turn my attention to another emerging global phenomenon that we cannot ignore in our quest for prosperity and unity. I am referring here to the challenge of insecurity in general, and more specifically to the growing threat of terrorism. For us in Kenya, terrorism matters, and vulnerability in this regard makes it imperative for us to forge close ties with our neighbors and to be attuned to developments relating to this threat in other parts of the world. The radicalization of young people extends beyond national or even continental borders. This fluid challenge requires unfailing solidarity between our states and a joint action plan between our national and regional levels. And this solidarity cannot be achieved if we do not break away from the artificial boundaries created by our colonial masters. Honorable members, there cannot be a good reason why it is easier for us to trade with Asia, Europe, and the Americas rather than with our own fellow Africans. We have ended up as a source of raw materials, exporting jobs that justifiably belong to our youth. This must come to an end. Africa must use her resources to create jobs for our own young people. Africa must significantly open her markets to African products in order to promote this ideal. That process can only be achieved if we start by opening up our borders to each other. We must open our eyes to the potential of unity. We must lose the fear of parochial and narrow thinking in which we see ourselves as competitors or rivals. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the sure way of us to industrialize our continent and to create hope for our young people. It is through the creation of this hope that we will put an end, and a permanent end, to the risks of insecurity and terrorism that comes from radicalizing our youth. We must incorporate our youth in our development agenda. We must open our boundaries in order to be able to industrialize our continent, in order to be able to create the jobs that our young people desperately need. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, let me say that our potential as an African continent will also never be fully accomplished if we do not acknowledge and incorporate our women into our development agenda. Kenya is committed to promoting women and girls into our national development and social fabric. We have made into law our commitment that 30% of all government procurement in Kenya is set aside for women, our youth, and persons with disabilities in order to ensure that they are fully incorporated in the economic development of our nation. We also have ensured that women are involved in all forms of leadership in our country, and Kenya is proud that all our key ministries, the Ministry of Lands, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, the ministry in charge of devolution, and our county governments are all ministries headed by women. This is a commitment that we have made, and we join our African brothers and sisters in calling for the full inclusion of women in the development agenda of this continent. In conclusion, honorable members, I believe that we on the continent stand on the edge of a new world. I believe strongly that if we work together and in harmony, we can combat all the challenges that we face on this continent. I believe strongly that with unity, we can achieve hope and the prosperity that our young people especially crave for. I believe that within our unity, we stand to remove the conflicts that have plagued our continent for many years. I strongly believe that today, we, the leaders who have inherited our positions from our forefathers and who have been granted the opportunity by our people to take this great continent to the next level, will do well to emulate our elders and those who have gone before us, those who gave everything they had so that we may be free. We, in turn, must know that if we take this opportunity and sow seeds of discord, we must be prepared to accept a harvest of conflict. But if indeed we take the opportunity granted to us by our own people to rededicate ourselves to the liberty, the prosperity, and the dignity of the people of this great continent, then there is no force that can or will hold us back. With those very few remarks, I say God bless you, God bless the African continent, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya, for your wonderful message, which I believe will resonate from every nook and cranny of the African continent. Your message is a message of hope, a message that Africa is rising, a message that the future of the African continent will depend on the work that we do today. We thank you